But the first game we're talking about, Dalton, is number 6 Oklahoma at Kansas, which is at noon Eastern time on Fox. And you mentioned it before how a number of these teams kind of had a scare this past week. Oklahoma was one of them. So the big storyline for me going into this is how do they respond to that scare? Now, they've kind of been walking the tightrope in these last couple games. Now, one of them was Texas, which honestly, you beat Texas. That's probably the best win of the season for any team right now. The other one last week was against UCF. They were down late in that game. They pulled out a 2-point victory over UCF that is now 3-4 on the season. So Oklahoma kind of had a hangover game against UCF after obviously the thrilling Texas win a few weeks ago. Now they got to play a Kansas team right now that's 5-2 and a pretty good Kansas team, honestly, Dalton. So yeah, the big storyline for me is just how will Oklahoma respond to the scare they had this past weekend?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you get in conference and everybody knows you, and I'll be honest with you, Oklahoma doesn't, especially offensively, they don't do a ton of things schematically that are very complicated. They do the simple things properly. They do it at a very, very, very fast pace. Defensively, we've sung the praises of Brent Venables, but over the last couple of weeks, it's looked a little shakier, right? 31 points and 29 points against UCF. They're starting to show the cracks a little bit on defense, and they can't afford that because their offense, they remind me a little bit of Oregon. Their offense doesn't go over the top, like have exceptional games by their standards, but they're very consistent. They're about as consistent as offense as you could see every week. Defensively, though, I'm starting to see some breakdowns on the back end that I don't think we're used to seeing now with Oklahoma. It looks almost a little more like last year, and I think a big struggle I found is in play action, all right? Over the since week 5, okay, it's their last 3 games, a 51 coverage grade against play action, which is in the bottom 20 of the country. Why is that important this week as a schematic factor? Kansas, basically they win and lose with their play action passing, and their 5 wins, an 85.4 passing grade on play action. Their 2 losses of 57.7. So, I'm pretty sure they're not going to have Jalen Daniels again this week. If it's Jason Bean, play action, especially running in play action, is even more important because he can't improvise the way that Daniels could, right? But this is where you're starting to see some breakdowns. Texas found this, and UCF capitalized on it too as well. The play action game and getting linebackers to step up and getting the ball to the intermediate levels of the defense has been giving Oklahoma a lot of problems. All right. It's not easy to get over the top on them. They handle east and west well, the screen game, they tackle well, but their second level of their defense in play action has been causing a lot of problems the last couple of weeks. And, we know Oklahoma is going to score 30 to 35 points. That's not a question, right? Can Kansas keep up with them? There's a road for them to do it, even with Jason Bean. Again, they have to have some success running the ball, and if they can set up the play action when Kansas has been their best on offense, that's when they've been getting off.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned it. My big matchup looking at this game is, can Jason Bean get anything going in the passing game? Now, it might sound like, no duh when you say, the starting quarterback is way better than the backup quarterback, but it is true in Kansas' case. Jalen Daniels, 88.4 passing grade, 12th among FBS quarterbacks. Jason Bean's been solid, don't get me wrong, 72.1. That's about average in college football right now, but there is a big difference between Jalen Daniels, one of the top quarterbacks in the country, and Jason Bean, who's a solid backup, a good backup, but still not the superstar that you have under center when you have Jalen Daniels back there. And you brought up a good point, too, where Kansas, without Jalen Daniels, has really relied on this run game. Devin Neal, their star running back, he has 265 rushing yards in the 3 games without Jalen Daniels this season. In those 3 games, that is 13th among Power 5 running backs this season. But the problem for Kansas, Oklahoma has 72 tackles for loss or no gain this year. That is 12 more than any other team in college football right now. Oklahoma's run defense is very sound. Should not be any surprise when you see Brent Venables coaching them. Danny Stutzman, their linebacker, has been fantastic in the run game. The defensive line has been fantastic as well. I just don't know if Devin Neal, can really lead this team to victory like he's done in previous games without Jalen Daniels. And that's why I think Jason Bean is going to have to make some throws, probably off play action, like you said, in order for Kansas to really have a shot at upsetting Oklahoma in this game.
Yeah, I agree. They have to. Kansas has to, as much as they can, stay within the foundation of their offense. Right, Bean is not the worst backup quarterback you could
No.
have, but he's not a. He's also not a guy you want to just get in a pure drop back game, especially against a defense like this. That's just dropping back and throwing the football is not how you beat Oklahoma. You have to have the foundation of your offense in. You have to be able to get to the play action. There are holes. There's holes in this defense. The cracks are showing. And Kansas definitely has a shot schematically to give Oklahoma a lot of problems. But you're right, with Neal and the running game, they have to set the foundation of the offense. And honestly, Bean will probably have to be a part of it. Not as heavy a part as Daniels would be, but if he can even get the read option game going a little bit, add a little misdirection to it, you can cause Oklahoma problems schematically. But there are steps. There has to be layers to it, right? And the other thing too for Kansas, they just can't fall behind. They fell behind last week and ended up losing to Oklahoma State. They can't fall behind. If they fall, it's exactly what we're saying. If they fall behind and they get in a pure drop back game where they have to just throw it into Oklahoma's secondary, it's going to be a long day.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dalton, who are you going with in this game? Are you picking the upset, or you think Oklahoma's going to keep their undefeated season alive?
I think it's gonna be a decent game. I do, but I'm gonna go with Oklahoma. I'm gonna say 41-34. I think we get a shootout. I think Kansas does find some holes. Bean's a competitor, actually. Yeah. For as much as he's a backup, he's fun to watch. He's never really out of the game. Even last year he did this where he gives you a good game, but. The other problem I have is Kansas, I started to think after they beat BYU, and I believe they held them to like 9 rushing yards, that maybe their run defense had turned a corner, and it hasn't. Since week 5, they have the 5th worst run defense in the country. And between the tackles on the season, they're the 11th worst run defense in the country. You can line up, and I think Oklahoma's going to want to do this because Oklahoma goes really, really fast, and they run the basics of their offense, right? They're going to line up. They're going to run between the tackles until Kansas can prove they can stop them, right? Oklahoma's a top 25 team running between the tackles. Kansas is a bottom 12 team. It's not a good matchup. I can see how Kansas's offense can have success in this game. I'm struggling to find where their defense will, especially, if Oklahoma gets the ball first and they come out with one of their drives where they run 13 plays in 3 minutes and 10 of them are run plays and Gabriel makes the easy throws. It sets up, we talked about Kansas trying to get to the foundation of their offense. They're trying to. I don't see too much reason why Oklahoma can't. So even if their defense struggles, I don't see a ton of reason Oklahoma won't put up a lot of points. I'll take Oklahoma by a touchdown.
Yeah, and you made a great point. I think Oklahoma's offense is just going to be too much for Kansas, honestly, to stop in this game. I think Kansas offensively is probably going to put up at least 35 points in order to have a chance in this game. I got Oklahoma in this one as well, 38-30. I agree with you. It's probably going to be a more of a shootout than people think, even without Jalen Daniels. But I do think the Sooners, get over the hump and beat Kansas and keep their undefeated season alive as they really, Oklahoma, if they lose one game, they're out. I don't think a one-loss Oklahoma team, even with a win over Texas in the rematch in the Big 12 championship game, I don't think that'll be enough to get in the college football playoff this year. We'll see how the rest of the college football landscape shakes out. But Oklahoma, I think, is almost in a boat where the rest of the schedule for them is just really not that strong. I think it's almost like, hey, you got to go undefeated in order to make the college football playoff. So really, they're kind of walking on a tightrope every game right now in order for them to make the 4-team playoff.